That's great. Well, thanks everyone for coming along. For those of you who don't know me already, my name's Andrew. I do most of the technical support here at Appliance Testing Supplies. I've probably spoken to most of you when you've purchased one of these kits, just sort of initial setup and questions and those sort of things. But what I was going to be doing today was going through sort of the aPAT software a bit more, so showing you how it all works, the basic ways to set it up. I'm sure most of you are probably already pretty familiar with it, but I thought we can cover it in a bit more detail. And I'll answer any questions at the end about the Delta, about the tester, about the aPAT, about anything really. If you've got any questions, we'll pop them on at the end, just on the chat window. If you've got anything to say during, please pop it in the chat window as well, so I can definitely answer it as we go. I've got an emulator to go with the aPAT software, so I can show you how it looks and operates. What I'd recommend definitely doing is in YouTube trying to increase the resolution of the broadcast. I've got it set as high as possible, but I think it defaults to a low resolution. So if you can use the settings, make it as high as it will go, and then you get a clear image of aPAT. Being it's a wide screen of YouTube, and also aPAT's in vertical mode. It doesn't appear as well, but I'll do my best to make it appear properly. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pop aPAT on the screen now. Can everyone let me know whether they can see that? Okay, so that should be appearing now for everyone. So this is what I call the main menu of aPAT. Now unfortunately I've only got some functionality. I can't do any Bluetooth connections, and this is just a modified one that stops Bluetooth warnings coming up. But I can definitely show you how to load projects and those sort of things, but when it comes to actually doing a test, it won't let me connect. So I'll just sort of simulate that as best I can. So this is pretty much your home screen. The major areas that people would use are the projects, the settings screen, which once it's set up you really don't need to change anything, the auto test editor, which I'll show you how to do, and that's for downloading the simple tests and those sort of things. And then you've got things like upcoming retests, help and about, but mainly I'll be focusing on the settings, the projects and the auto test editor. So the first thing I always suggest to do for people is to, within the Delta, you've got the simple test menu, which is something we program ourselves, and it's usually got your class 1, your class 2, your leads, and then we add additional ones, some leakage tests, some RCD tests, those sort of things. And what you can do is you can download those from the Delta into the aPAT software. So when you're running a test, you can choose the test you want to perform and it will do it automatically. The benefit being, if something happens and you wipe the Delta, you can actually copy those tests back into the Delta and it will continue from where it was. It's something we get a few times. People initialize and wipe the unit, and then they've lost all the codes and they've got the basic ones. So with this software, if that ever happens, you can then copy them back across to the Delta, and that can make your life a little bit easier. So to do that, it's pretty straightforward. You just go into Auto Test Editor, choose the Delta that we're working on, and then usually there'll be nothing here by default. So if you were setting this up for the first time, you click the download button, and then in theory it would search and it will find your tester. You just choose your Delta, which always appears in blue on the screen, and then it will actually download all the simple test codes straight from the unit. In this case, I've just added some here additionally. There's class 1, class 2 leads, class 1 leakage, class 2 leakage, and we add some additional ones in as well. So I think we had an RCD test, some surge protected tests. There's about 10 in total, and they're the same as the simple test in your menu of your Delta. The benefit with this, and one thing that's really useful, is you can actually change those simple tests. So by default, we sort of have earth continuity enabled. The limit, which is usually always 200 milliamps. and the pass of 1, and the test time, which we normally set at 2 or 3. But this means you can actually go through and create your own test sequences. So there are people out there who like to do an earth test, an insulation, and a leakage test. Or they might want to run a longer leakage test for some equipment out there that it might take 10 seconds for a drill or something to power on to full speed. You can actually go down to leakage and set the run time to be 30 seconds or 10 seconds. So you get a bit more customization apart from the ones that we program in there, which are by default probably the most commonly used ones, and the shortest run times because you want to get through the job quickly. But having this and being able to change these run times or polarity tests, you can make your own test sequences. So to do that, essentially, if it's green, it means it's enabled, and then you choose your parameters. So if I was to do an insulation, for example, just a class 1, I enable it. I make it at 250 volts or 500 volts, depending on the test needs. Normally it's 500 volts for this test. You make your limit 1 megohm, and your run time of 3 seconds. And you can go through and make all these ones up, and you can make additional ones as you need using any of these sort of function tests. So that's quite a useful feature, and that's something as a bonus you get with aPAT. And then you can download them, and you can upload these back into the Delta as well. So if you decide that you're going to just use the Delta for testing without going through the PC software or the Android software, you can upload them back into your Delta. To create, essentially, group is there. If you want to add a new one in, you just choose auto test. Type in a name, so I'm going to do RCD for example, and it appears here. And then you go through and change your settings. You can also delete them. If you stuff it up, just click the tick box and press delete. And it disappears. So that's a really easy way to add some additional tests and sort of gives the Delta a lot more power and functionality. Some people are happy with what's programmed, but the longer leakage test is probably the biggest benefit, particularly if you're dealing with stuff that takes a little while to power on. So that's the auto test menu. So let me go back. The next area is the settings, and this is the sort of thing the first time you go through all these settings to set them all up. Once you've done it, you don't really need to worry about it, but I'll just go through each of the steps so people can see what you can and can't do really. The top 3 ones you don't really need to worry about too much. Retest notice will give you a warning when it starts up of how many days ahead the testing is due. So that's if you've got some customers, you know their tests are coming up, you can do a search and it will display 30 days ahead, 45 days ahead, 2 months ahead if you want to give them plenty of notice that stuff is due. Default retest period is the number of months that it will automatically assign to each new test. So usually you leave it at 0 because you might be bouncing between 3 month, 6 month and 12 month tests. But if you're just doing everything as an office for 12 months, you can preset this to 12, and then everything you test will automatically assume as a 12-month test, and then you can go and change it if you need be. But that could be useful if you're doing a lot of the same gear every time. If you're just testing stuff every 3 months for a building site or construction, you can just put in 3 months there, and then it will just automatically default. Region, this normally prompts you at the very start to choose where you're working. Pretty self-explanatory. Most people will be doing AUS NZ, but you can change to these other different settings if needs be, and then it will take you out and then you go back in. The printer setting is pretty much evident if you've got one of the printers, whether the Zebra, the P4T or the 2824 Plus, and this is actually where you can go through and select which printer is going to be by default. Now with this software, and the same with the cheaper Patlink software, you technically don't ever connect to the printer. The software does it for you. It automatically assigns which printer it's printing to. It just needs to know what format it's working in. So in this sort of situation, it won't let me because I haven't got the Bluetooth, but I'll click on here. It would scan through, and if your printer's nearby, it'll appear on the screen. Now the printer always appears in grey, and the tester always appears in blue. That's not a bad thing. It's not like it's highlighted out. It's just the way they designed it so that you can identify which is testers and printers. So normally it would scan through and in theory appear with either P4T or 2824 Plus or Zebra PRN, depending on which sort of printer configuration. So with this particular kit, most people out there would have the P4T printer. So you can easily just choose that. P4T will appear, and in this part that says none at the moment, it will list P4T and then usually the last few digits of the serial number. Then you just go in and pick your printer model and you choose which one. So P4T is the one we normally supply with this kit, but you do also have this 2824 Plus. Not many people use the MTP 400, it's a bit of an older printer. So most people would have the P4T. Zebra mobile print settings. Really don't need to change this too much. As long as your printouts are coming pretty good, you shouldn't need to worry, but this allows you to adjust left and right, up and down, how the tag appears. The last one is the label setup. Now, going into here, you've got your wide and long. So the P4T and the Printec come out horizontally, whereas the 2824 Plus, which is a bigger, older, mains powered printer, actually comes out vertically for the tag. So it just helps identify which way the tag will be coming out. So normally for the P4T, which is what we supply, you go with the top option. The last part is actually the label logos, and this is actually probably one of the key features of this particular system, is the ability to change the part that comes out on the tag, the logo. So as it says here, it needs to be a monochrome, bitmap, JPEG or PNG file of 300 by 300 pixels, so a square. From experience, the simpler the logo the better. Because it's just black burning onto the tag, you want to keep it as simple as possible. So by default they load a pass logo, but you can put anything in here. And to do that, you actually copy your image file onto the tablet itself that you've got connected. So if you want to change it, for example, you click on pass label logo. Now this is actually in the files of the tablet. There's a folder called sample logos, and that's usually the best place to load any logos, and you can have multiple images. So if you're doing work for multiple customers or they want their image to appear, you can just pop it into the sample logos folder and it will appear here. Usually bitmap is the easiest, it's usually the most generic format. So in this case, I'm just going to choose the pass default bitmap and it appears there. You've got options, you can clear and that will delete it. Or if I go back and choose pass, I can actually rotate it. So I can have it appear a certain way. Some people like it to appear that way and other people appear that way. It really depends on how you want to put the tag in, how your logo looks, that sort of stuff. But play around with it. It's usually easy to give it an idea how it will appear on the screen. And then exactly the same for the fail logo. So you just do the same thing. Go to sample logos. Danger, fail, you don't really need to change around too much. But to do all this, you do it through the tablet. So when you connect your tablet up to your computer, you'll normally get the options to view files and folders. There's a folder called Metrel, and then you'll see a folder called sample logos. And then you just pop everything into there. And this can be changed on the fly as well, so you can do some testing, literally change the logo to a different one, and then the next tag you print will come out with pass or fail. So let me just put that back to fail. Rotate, like so. So that's a really useful option, and that's something that a lot of other systems don't offer you, that sort of flexibility, so it's actually quite a good benefit. Oops, going down. So the next, select BT scanner. We don't really use that. That's more for this particular software. You can use the Sigma aPAT as well, which is sort of an older Metrel unit that has a standalone barcode scanner. So we normally ignore those two because they're just not really relevant here. Device activation. This is usually only have to do once, and this is how you actually activate the software on the tester. So to go in, you can actually it'll list all the testers that you've got activated previously, or currently I should say. At the moment there's none. To activate it, you kick the little key with a plus. This won't let me go through, but it will essentially scan and display all the testers that are available. This can be a bit of a tricky part because depending on which version of Android you're running, there's different ways of doing it, whether you have to just connect the tester through aPAT or whether you need to connect the tester up as a Bluetooth device in the tablet and then it will appear. And that seems to be more of an Android 6 sort of situation, whereas the Android 5 doesn't seem to do it. That's the sort of thing. Just give me a call and I can definitely walk that one through over the phone. It can vary a little bit, and it can also depend on brands as well, just to make it extra complicated. But in theory, you would just click the plus, your tester would appear in blue, you tick it, and then it will take you to a screen to activate the software. And that usually comes on a bit of paper inside the kit with a QR code, and then you just scan the QR code. If the code appears, click activate, and the tester will appear here, and that will remove any of the limitations that you get in terms of timeouts and that sort of stuff. And I think it also enables a few of the extra options. That's pretty much the first thing you do. You shouldn't need to do anything with the activation once you've done it, unless you change your tester over or your tablet. If that fails or dies or you get a new one, we just need to activate it again. Scrolling down a little bit, you've got the option to always load with a spelling mistake, load last year's project. So if you're just consistently going back to the same job every time, or you're going back and you're not going to be changing and jumping between jobs, just leave it unticked, but you can tick it if you want. Click the MI3309 because that's essentially what we're working with. And if you untick the MI3310, which is the Sigma aPAT, it will just remove any additional functions and features that you're not going to be able to use. So leaving that unticked and just ticking the 3309 is easily the best way. Enable double label parameters is not something we really worry about too much. It allows you to print out 2 tags from one test, but there's not many situations where you'll do that because essentially each test requires a new tag. But some people do use that. Show address field in location element. That's just putting, like, if you've got a location and then you can put an address line, say 15 Kellett's Road, Rowville, or something like that. Once again, we don't really need to worry about that one. Auto increment appliance ID is really useful. So if you start with 001, you will then later go to 002, 003 automatically. I don't think it works particularly well if you use letter than numbers, because it's hard to increment if there's letters involved, but just keeping it at 001 or whatever, and then incrementing from there is the easiest way. The print and save button preferences is something that's not enabled by default, and I've asked Metrel to turn it on because it's a very useful function. It's a special button that doesn't appear by default that if you press it, will save the test and print it in one go. So I quite often recommend to turn it on by just pressing the first option, which is enable print and save, and then print label and save to Android device, so it saves it on the tablet or the phone. So ticking the first and the third one, it's really useful. It makes the job easier. Rather than having to press save and then print, it does it all in one go for you. This is not set on by default, so you can turn it on yourself. I'm hoping that Metrel in future releases will make it the default option because it's very easy. These last few options are what will appear when you actually complete a test, and that usually appears along the top above the up, down, left, right buttons. So you've got things like print without saving first if you really want to, but it's not really recommended to do that. It's a lot better to save it and then print so you know that the information's all secure. And then you can turn off things. So if you don't want to be saving to the tester, if you untick that, it'll only give you the option to save to the Android device, and vice versa. But using the Android device is a lot simpler and easier. OK button is, we normally leave that unticked, but it just gives you the options to change how things appear when you press the OK button on the tablet. It gives you additional options, but we usually leave it as unticked. Pretty much apart from that, the BT connection settings. These are sort of legacy settings from people who've got older tablets and phones, usually running Android 4 are when you need to look at these. This is a different version of the Bluetooth connection settings, so it helps with some of the older devices. The newer ones don't need it, but if you're having connection issues, try ticking this one and seeing whether you get more stability. And the ASUS Memo BT fix was to do with the tester turning off without it disconnecting properly. But that was more for some of the memo pads, which we used to originally supply a few years ago, but it hasn't really been an issue these days. But once again, if you're having connection issues, tick it and see how it goes. Apart from that, that's the major settings. Version and DB number you don't need to worry about. But once again, if you just set these up the first time and leave them as they are, you don't need to worry about too much. Anyone got any questions so far, or should I continue on? Awesome. Thanks, Carl. No worries. So what I'll do now is go to the open projects, and that's where people will be doing the majority of their work. I'll cancel. So this is pretty much where you do most of the design and operating of the entering databases, creating items, all those sort of things. Now it does come in two versions. You can essentially get, this is for a basic sort of phone where it's just one screen. The higher resolution tablets will actually split the screen in half. So you'll have all the appliances down one side and then the parameters down the other. But this emulator will only let you do just the one screen. Won't let me go any higher. So I'll just simulate it like this and it will just bounce around a little bit more. But on a lot of the tablets, particularly like the Samsung Tab 8, which is what we supply nowadays, it actually, being a high-res screen, will actually split it into two parts. So you get a divide down the middle. The major parts people always need to know about is this will show you the current status of the connection. So at the moment it's disconnected. If I tap the little Metrel icon with a Bluetooth symbol in the middle, you get the scan, reconnect, disconnect, and the remote control, which won't work in this simulator, but it allows you to scan for your delta, just automatically reconnect to the last one used, and disconnect. The disconnect is particularly useful if you're going to be finishing your work for a while. So if you've done all you need and you're going to going finishing the day, or you're going on coffee break or whatever, just pressing disconnect will disconnect everything cleanly. It does happen randomly where items will power off and they will still be connected and the unit can get a little bit stuck. So it's not usually an issue if you're just testing constantly, but bringing it up and going to disconnect when you finish your work disconnects everything cleanly, and then you can just go reconnect when you want to start again. Along the top you've got your little Bluetooth icons, and that's another option to do the reconnect, disconnect, and instrument controls, whichever works best for you. Sometimes that doesn't always appear on some Android devices, so at least you know you've got both options there. The floppy disk appears in this version, and in other versions it will appear as three little dots, and then you can go to File, and then it will bring up this menu. It's pretty self-explanatory. Open allows you to open the last any database. So if I go open, I can choose a project I've worked on previously. And if I go open last use, it'll just open last database. So for this, you've got new, so a whole new database, and keeping each database separate with customers is a really useful way of stopping data getting mixed up. It's one of the problems with the Delta is every item in the unit is under the one category. So being able to create different databases for different customers or different locations make life a lot easier. Save is pretty self-explanatory. It will just save the work as you go, and save as if you want to change the file name. Import we don't really use a great deal because that's more of a SigmaPad issue, but export is what you'll use to get the data from the Android device across to your aPAT software. So in this case, I'm going to create a new database. I'm working on for a new customer. So I click New, enter file name, so I'm going to call this one Company A, or whatever you want it to be. Keeping it relevant makes life a lot easier. If you use a company name that you know, it means you can easily find it later on. And then I click Save. So it's now got Company A there, and it will still be disconnected. And it brings me Node. So Node is the very, very top level of the database. You can't do much about it, but if you press and hold, it's currently a dark blue. If I press and hold, it actually gives me sort of some menu options. So it changes to the option to actually edit. So I can then create the node name here. So I'm going to call this Company A Site 5, for example. And it appears there just to help you identify what you're working with. You've then got also some options. You can delete the node, and then you can up and down, cut, paste, and copy. You don't really need to worry about that too much. And then I just press the back arrow, and it goes to a darker blue, and it's now got node. After that, I click on Add Element, and I can start adding location and appliances. Project we don't really use, that's more of a SigmaPAT function, and I found if you use that, you can have a few issues when you import into PatLink, because it doesn't recognize the project as a tree level. So I always say just to use location, it makes life a lot easier. So with this, it'll bounce across to parameters, and I can name the location. So I'm going to go kitchen. and description of kitchen. You can use that if you want, or you can just keep it simple, but I could just put here level 1 kitchen if I'm working on a multi-level. It's now giving me the option at the top here, a little red floppy disk, and this is like a save as you go option. So if I press that, it just saves it, and then I know. So I'm going to go back to tree, and it's now giving me the option for kitchen. And now I can add appliance. It's removed the option for location and project because I can't add a location with a location, but now I can easily add an appliance. So in this case, it bounces across the parameters, and I start putting in the details. So I'm going to go appliance 001. I'm going to name this kettle. Location's already come across, as it's given me the it's just picked up that that's the location that the appliance has been added into. Now test code, this is where we downloaded those custom tests before or created them manually. So we normally leave that blank, and I go to custom tests, click on group, and I can choose the test I want to perform. So in this case, I'm just going to go with class 2, and then I can do the retest period. Now because I set it for a default of 12 months, it's set to 12, but I can easily make that 6. Calculated risk we don't really worry about. Username, that will come across from the tester. Once the test has been performed, it'll come up with your license details or whatever you set in the machine. And the test date just uses the system's information. You can change it if you want, but it's just easier to set it at today's date, and then it will just automatically increment by 3, 6 or 12 months. Once I've done all of that, I can add in attachments. Measurements won't do anything because we haven't done the test yet, but it's got all the information there. Now what it would normally do is, once I'm happy with all of that, I press the start button, and it would actually then open up the control panel on the screen, which I don't think it's going to let me show here. No. What it would normally show is a little control panel with an up, down, a test mem, and a tab and escape button. And they're the same 6 buttons on the actual Delta itself, so you know what you're looking at in terms of navigating. And in theory, if your test is set for automatic, it'll just start through clicking and doing all its tests. You can control it, so you've got the up and downs. If you want to do it manually, you just press the test button. I recommend not touching the tester while all this is going on. It's a lot easier to just use it all through the tablet. It saves it getting 2 lots of information. If you're pressing the buttons and it's trying to do its tests through the tablet, it can sort of cause a bit of confusion. So I always recommend just to let it go straight through. Letting it control, and then it will give you a pass or a fail. And then in theory, you'll have a button that will have print and save. If you press that, the Delta will beep to save the information, and then it will print out a tag. And that's when it will print out the logo or whatever else you've chosen. And then essentially, once you've finished that, go to tree, go back to kitchen, add element, and then add your next element. So it's automatically incremented it. I just type in toaster, kitchen, retest period 12 months automatically set, and I choose custom test, and I'm going to do it as a class 1. And then I click on start and repeat the process. So it becomes quite smooth, and once you sort of get the hang of everything, you can start entering all your details quickly. You do also have the option to add multiple. So this is mainly used if you've got, say you've got 4 extension leads, and you know they're going to be appliance numbers 5, 6, 7, 8. I can click on multiple, and then number new elements. So I'm going to have 4 new elements, and I'm going to go with 003 because that's the next one. And name is going to be an IEC lead. Location, retest period, I'm going to make it 3 months because it's on a building site. Choose my test, and then go OK. And it's now added 4 appliances. I think I entered the numbers wrong, but it's added 4 units, and then I can go and I can just start testing again. So it's automatically added everything in. So that's a really useful feature if you've got a whole group of the same item to test. Instead of having to add 1 lead individually, you can add 4 or 5 leads. Starting out, I always recommend just to add everything as a single item. But once you get more familiar with the system, you can then add multiples. One thing I forgot to mention is that I easily describe this as a tree hierarchy. So node is at the very top, and then you've got kitchen, location, and then you can expand in and out. So once you start to get multiple items, you just click the little plus button, the arrow button each way, and then you can add. You can just sort of make the inventory a bit cleaner. When I want to go and add a new location, so I've done all my testing in the kitchen, and I'm going to move on to the showroom. If I'm in kitchen, it's not going to let me add another location. So I actually need to go back up to node. Then it gives me the option to add a location, and then I'm going to call this one warehouse, and this is going to be warehouse B. And then I click a little save. Now go back to tree, and to make it a little bit cleaner, I can minimize that, and then I can go through and add more appliances. The good part about the aPAT, which is a benefit as opposed to the basic sort of PAT linked Android software, is the ability to go back. So say I've gone to the kitchen, but someone didn't tell me that they'd stolen the urn, I can go back in and add that appliance in. Now the item number will change because it's just incrementing it before, but you can easily add appliances that you may have missed or gone back, or they were in use and you've gone back to test them a second time or later on. You can just go back and add them in as you need. And then go through. So that's adding appliances. You do have the option to upload and download from the tester if there's existing data in there. So if you've bought aPAT later on and you want to upload the information from there, you can upload, and you can also download it into the Delta as well. If you want to be using the Delta to download the records to aPAT, the PAT link on your PC, you can. Most people probably don't worry about it, but it is an option that's there. And you can also reprint a tag from print QR. So if your tag machine, if your printer runs out of tags or you stuff it up or it doesn't look right, just select it, print QR, and it will then just print out another copy of the tag for you. So that won't do it there. And so that's always useful if your tag didn't print out correctly or you run out, or if you want to print a couple of them for whatever reason. And then click save. So that's adding appliances. Does anyone have any questions? Any suggestions? Sorry about that. Has anyone found any quicker ways to do things or any little bugs or annoyances with how the aPAT works? Because Metrel are always keen for feedback. No, it's not. You can upload from PatLink to the Sigma PAT tester, but it requires purchasing the PatLink Pro Plus software. The Delta itself, being a fairly basic model, doesn't allow for uploading at all. So that's where they've designed aPAT to sort of get around that sort of limitation, because by default the Delta is a download-only machine. The only way you could do it was previously was with the Sigma, which is their much more bigger, expensive model, and purchasing the additional software. So no, by default you can only go from the tester to aPAT, but not from the PatLink software on the computer. Sorry about the screen jumping around. It's a bit tricky trying to use the emulator and then control it differently. So the last part to do, no worries Carl, the last part that people normally then do is to get the information across into your tablet or the computer. So to do that, let me just set something up. So to export your data, it's a two-step process. The first thing to do is to click on the little file, and then you go export projects. From here, these are all your projects in your database, and you've got all the ones we've done. So in this case, we did company A. So I just need to select it, and it comes up with a message, finished exporting project. And what it does, it compiles it into a format or a file that the aPAT link on the computer can read. So once I've done that, I click OK. I then switch to aPAT link on the computer. So this is now aPAT link. So this is some information I've downloaded from previous files and customers, all details. To import it, you essentially click on the file and then the import button. It'll then say import data from aPAT. So I click the import button, browse to the, in this case, the tab A, tablet, and there's a Metrel folder. And then lastly, there's a folder called aPAT export. And then this is all the databases on there, but here's one called company A. And it's a PADFX file, which I'm not quite sure what that means, but I click on company A and then click open, which you can't see on the screen. And it's been imported successfully. So then I click OK, and it's now download 10. So then I can click out, kitchen, and there's the two appliances that I've done, a kettle and a toaster. So that's essentially how you export data. It's pretty straightforward, and then from here you can then do all of your options in terms of renaming files, adding a details. So if I want to click on here, I can rename it to something else. And that's all my information. And then I've got the options to go to create report. Hang on. No. Give me one moment. Okay, it's not going to go. There we go. I can do create report. Normally appears from the drop down menu, but you can also go to create report and then create your reports on the computer, PDF and that sort of thing, which I covered last time in the database and the Delta. Does anyone have any questions regarding reports? Or anything to do with the exporting of data? All good. Okay, well I'll minimize that. Let me just switch back to Android. Turn that one off. aPAT link. Saving a Google Drive. Not that I'm aware of. You can export the data. We've got share projects. So you can send the file, the database to Google Drive or Dropbox, those sort of things. But I think it's a one-way send. I don't think it allows you to store it or run it from the cloud. You can back it up. So that's always a good option if you've got your database, if you're out and about and you've got internet access, just back it up to cloud storage. So if anything ever happens to the phone or tablet, you still have your databases before you import it. But you can't run it, from what I know, off a cloud storage. It has to be locally on the tester. So it's more of a backup feature than anything else. Is that what you're referring to? Okay, so once I'm guessing once data has changed, it can be imported. Yes, it can. Yeah, that's right. Sort of, it's based on the premise that you're out and about doing your testing for the day, and then you get back to your desktop or your computer at the end of the day, and then you can just import all your data. Or if you're doing it for a couple of days, you just finish the third day and then do it across. But there's no harm in backing it up if you've got internet access on your phone or tablet to some sort of cloud storage. It's never a bad thing. No worries. Yeah, it's um, very much these sort of systems are quite basic. They've Metrel have introduced this, and it's more because of what Android can do than what the actual aPAT can do. It's sort of a default setting to back up to cloud. These systems are very much based on doing the data, downloading it via USB to the PAT link, and importing it that way. You can import the file if you save it to cloud storage and then import it into PatLink. You can do it that way, if that makes sense. But these systems are quite basic, so this sort of integration is actually just because it's what Android does, not so much because how it operates. Anyone else with any other questions? That's pretty much the basics of the PatLink. Unfortunately, I wish I could show you the actual syncing and printing out of tags, but with this emulator, it doesn't allow for any Bluetooth communications. So does anyone else have any other questions? Anything they want to ask? aPAT, Delta, test and tag regulations required? Well, you've got me. No worries, Carl. Okay, well, I think if no one else has any other questions, that's pretty much the basics of aPAT. It can look a little bit daunting to start with. Once you work out how it all operates, it can make a bit of sense. It's not the prettiest software in the world, but it does the job quite well. Allows you to do all the reports, that sort of stuff. Um, you've got the additional features of uploading and downloading, but sometimes I just say to people, just keep it simple. Just do your testing, download to the computer, and then keep it straightforward. So I guess the thing is to remember you can change the logos. That's a real selling point. And some people get confused by not, but when they're in a location, not being able to change or add new locations. So always returning to the node and then adding appliances from there. But apart from that, that's pretty much the basics of the aPAT software. You don't really ever need to change anything in the settings, to be honest. Once it's all set up and working, you really just leave it as it is and just do your testing, and hopefully it's a pretty straightforward process. But if there's any other questions, I'll give it 30 seconds or so. Otherwise, yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for coming along. I hope you've had some interest. I'll put my email address in the notes. So if you've ever got any questions on how to test, I'll pop it there. Oh wow, 270 hotel room. That'd be a lot when you have sort of 5 or 6 appliances in every room, and then just repeating the same process over and over again. So I guess you'll be pretty good at how it operates pretty soon. It's a very straightforward app. Let me change that back. But yeah, it's once you start getting into the routine, it's just getting into the flow of things. But choosing the right test is usually the hardest part. But I guess you'll be doing the same thing every time. But if you ever get stuck, we always say this to any customers, if you have any issues, just give us a call. We can definitely help you out. Whether it's how to test an appliance or the software or just regulation questions, definitely give us a call. We can definitely help whatever it goes. No worries. Thanks, Carl. Yeah, thanks everyone. If you have any questions, definitely give myself a call or Matt in the office. We can answer pretty much most things. And then there's Sean in the Perth office, and he does just as much, more the afternoons when Melbourne goes home. Definitely, lots of repetition. Yeah, that's the one of the I guess one of the hard parts is just doing the same thing over and over again. But you just get into a routine and you can just get through them really quickly. No worries. Well, thanks everyone. Hope you have a good night. This will be on our YouTube channel, so if you know anyone else who's got these kits, this will appear on our channel in the next probably couple of hours for anyone else who wants to watch it. But otherwise, thanks guys. Have a good night.